In this interview, we talked to Marcus Blanchard. Now, Marcus, he's a top shooter in the PRS gas gun series, but he also has a ton of experience with bolt guns. So sit down, relax, and just listen to what he has to say. And it's about a 25-minute interview, but should be good and well worth your time.
Yeah, so I'm Marcus Blanchard, and I've been competing in the precision rifle circuit, I guess you could say, since about 2008, 2009. I initially got into it with my dad. So he competed in the NRA high power, and that's kind of where I started. It was a good place to work on fundamentals, but shooting paper from static positions kind of got old kind of quick. And from there, I branched out to the precision tactical style matches that the PRS is now famous for. Got started down in Las Vegas, and it's just kind of taken off ever since then. Got bit by the long-range bug, I guess you could say.
How many years?
Gosh, about 8 or 9.
Cool.
So it's coming up there.
Yeah, that's good. Did you shoot in the military? Were you in the military?
Yeah, so I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, from 2009 to 2013. I was just in the infantry. I was an LAV crewman, or light armored vehicle crewman. I didn't shoot competitively, just due to the nature of, we had deployments and other stuff that we had to do at the time. So, we didn't have slots that we could fill to go shoot on competitive teams. But while I was in the Marine Corps, I had the opportunity to shoot more with the Vegas crew, the Sin City Precision guys, and get to know the Phoenix, the long-range shooters down in Phoenix, and all of the organizations that they have down there. So I didn't get to shoot as part of the military, but I was still able to shoot in my own free time, and that's kind of why I am, here today, is because of those relationships and just getting to know everybody down there. So
cool. So historically, it's always been a bolt action. That's been the big precision thing. But now gas guns are really starting to take off.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on gas guns versus bolt actions? And
so that's a good question. Obviously, bolt guns are going to be a lot more simple. There's a lot less going on, so there's a lot less troubleshooting that you kind of have to do with them if something does go wrong. With the gas guns, it's if you build your own, it's kind of a balance between reliability and precision, especially with the AR-10s that I've noticed. So I mean, me, like you mentioned, coming from a bolt gun background, every match that I had been to, and I also ran monthly matches in Park City for about a year and a half, and every match that I saw someone bring an AR-10 in like a 6.5 Creedmoor or 260, that style caliber, something always went wrong. Now I think the technology is starting to catch up to the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6 Creedmoor, those higher pressure rounds, where they're pushing out the gas block to increase that dwell time for the brass, so it's not getting beat up as much. So the port pressure is a lot lower than it would be with a standard rifle length. So what they're doing is they're pushing the gas system out an additional 2 inches, in addition to tuning it to the buffers, the springs, and running the high pressure bolts. I have the small firing pin. I think that's those 3 things kind of in conjunction really have brought together the AR-10 to where it is today and made it reliable and precise as well. So I don't think you'll get the bench rest precision that you will with a bolt gun, out of a gas gun. However, you can still get reliable sub-minute precision from a gas gun, which for match purposes, I mean, the majority of your matches, if you come across a minute-sized target or 1 minute of angle or even a minute and a half, that's a pretty small target. And even bolt guns in a match scenario, with winds and you're under a time constraint,
that's what I was gonna ask.
Small.
Do you really need that
small.
extreme precision that you get in a bolt gun in the match scenario?
Yeah.
So.
And that's where it just boils down to the specific match. So different match directors have their own style. Some like smaller targets. Others run a little bit bigger targets. For example, some matches out east, K&M, for example, they have an awesome facility and they run a really good match, and they cater to a lot of the newer shooters coming in as well. So they typically have targets that are a little bit on the bigger side. So if you're running a gas gun in that match, I wouldn't feel like I was at a disadvantage to a bolt gun. If I go to maybe a match out west where we're shooting in the hills, it's really windy, target sizes might be a lot smaller, I might be giving up a couple points to a bolt gun. So it's just it's different tools for different jobs, just like anything.
Yeah, I remember I got an AR-10. I did a custom AR-10 back, it had to be 8 years ago. So it's just starting to come out, nothing standardized. There was really, you had a 308, and I remember I couldn't run 7-8 shots without a hiccup. And I'm tuning this, changing springs, just like tweaking, and then it was just a project to the point. I was like, I just want to throw it in the scrap bin. But now once it's tuned, which took forever, now it shoots freaking great.
Right?
Now it shoots great. I had to sacrifice some precision because I had my bolt, the chamber was super tight, and it was causing a lot of problems. But I was shooting half-inch groups, you know. But I couldn't run a mag, so it's pointless. So it's complete. I might as well run a bolt gun, right?
Exactly.
But I had that opened up just a little bit, and I lost maybe a quarter inch worth of accuracy, which is nothing with wind anyway. But now it runs, and it doesn't hiccup at all. So that balance.
That's good. It is a balance. And a lot of different builders, for example, I shoot for Lone Star Armory out of the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area, and they have changed my perspective on not just gas guns, but specifically the precision AR-10 platforms. So, I even sat down with Andrew, the owner, and I was very upfront with kind of my experience with gas guns up to that point, and he was very confident that the rifle that they were building was going to impress me, and it did. So,
tell me about that conversation.
Yeah, so I'll edit it a little bit, but I told him that every match that I'd been to, like I was mentioning earlier, that an AR-10 had shown up to had more or less fallen apart or didn't work, and the shooter left a little bit more frustrated than they would have liked due to rifle issues. That rifle is back at Lone Star right now, just getting rebarreled and getting replacement parts tuned up and everything. I put over about 2,500 rounds through it throughout the course of this season for the PRS gas gun series that they did. This was the first year, so we had matches that were kind of tailored for the gas guns. Kind of a blend between like a 3-gun, I guess, but still with a heavy emphasis on precision. So speed was a very important aspect, but the precision was still paramount. So the person who still missed the least amount of targets was still the winner. So it's not like we're running them blazing, shooting paper 5 yards away or anything. Still precision, still important, still long range. And so, like I was saying, throughout the season, put about 2,500 rounds down that barrel, and not a single failure, during the match. The only failures I had was just I didn't tune the gas block when I was doing some load development, but that was just me being lazy. So once I got everything tuned in and running where I needed it to be for match scenarios and match settings, I didn't have a single failure.
Nice. And then what caliber did you get? Are you using?
So right now I'm shooting 6.5 Creedmoor. So just do
500 rounds on the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah, it was still shooting good, but just due to the matches and the high round counts and the high, I guess, what's the word? The pace at which you're putting rounds downrange is a lot higher. So I just wanted to pull it. I didn't want to be halfway through a match and have everything,
So you might as well
go to crap.
Get a rebarrel in the off-season instead of...
Exactly. But even with these gas gun matches, the targets are increased because we're working with AR-15s, AR-10s, so both 223, 308, and then any kind of open class 6 Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, that sort of thing. So just due to the nature of it, they increase the target sizes a little bit. So you don't need a gun that shoots half minute to be competitive. The guy that won it this year, he was shooting a 1.5-inch gun for the majority of the season. So it all comes down to you as a shooter. So the precision is nice. It's kind of like insurance, It's nice to have if you break a shot closer to the edge, and you have more confidence that it's going to go where you intend it to go. But if you're still breaking good shots closer to the center, which ideally that's what we want to do. It doesn't always work out that way. But if you're breaking better shots than the next guy over you, you're probably going to have more impacts, regardless of how precise your rifle is.
So with that, I think there's a point of diminishing returns when you're dealing with a custom rifle.
Yes.
Right? Because you can spend, I mean, Jesus, you're at the point now where off the shelf, you're getting sub MOA off the shelf, and that's not even,
easy.
People don't even brag about, oh, this is a sub MOA anymore. Everything's sub half or more, right? But now you're saying that MOA is still competitive if you have the practice, so you can get an MOA gun for $700-800 off the shelf.
Oh yeah.
Or to get an extra half-inch smaller group size, you're at $3 or $4 grand. You know, what is that point of diminishing returns? You know, you get it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think part of it is the repeatability of that precision, and that's with the custom build. That's, you know, part of what you're paying for is nothing moving. You know, once you zero, you know, as long as you're using a quality scope, your zero's not going to shift, and you can repeatably lay down those, you know, half-minute, sub-half-minute groups. You know, for working with the bolt guns. Even with the gas gun, I've laid down a number of, you know, 5 to 10 round groups that are around half minute, which for me, that's plenty of precision, especially for the gas gun, and like I was saying, with the little bit increased target sizes. So, and I've shot a number of bolt gun matches for various reasons that are my own fault with a gun that is shooting, you know, about 0.8 inches, you know, at 100 yards, so about 3/4 MOA. Usually due to the barrel being shot out, and I just didn't change the barrel. So with those matches that I have shot, I mean, I've still placed in the top 10 in all of them. So I think one was a tie for 3rd, one was a 7th, and I think the other one was either 9th or 10th. But I mean, not stellar performances, but still beating the majority of the pack. And, you know, I knew that going in. Yeah.
The gun that's shooting like crap.
Yes, right. So per internet groups, you know, I wouldn't be able to hit the broadside of a barn. But I knew that going in, you know, I'm shooting about a 3/4 minute gun right now. And as I was going through the stages, I just had to focus on breaking those good shots. And that's what, you know, pulled me through over the course of a 2-day match to, you know, still place reasonably well. Nice. So,
so if somebody's
so don't get too wrapped up in the precision aspect of it. I know it's fun to shoot tiny groups and everything, but if you know, you're not going to shoot tiny groups every single time. If you focus more on breaking good shots, reading the wind, that sort of thing, you'll be a lot more successful than the guy that's been tweaking his load for the past 300 rounds. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. That too. So
cool. So a little bit about like equipment selection. I'm just thinking, guys that are out there that, you know, they're married, have a bunch of kids, like probably a majority of the people that are out shooting.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to get into it. You know, what's the most important piece of equipment other than the rifle and your bipod? Because that's probably hands down the most. What other piece of equipment is the most influential in having?
So equipment that's not attached to the rifle, or like a supplementary piece of equipment?
Supplementary, just anything that's going to help you
get those hits. Okay. Yeah. So if it was attached to the rifle, I would say a quality optic and, you know, good rings, because if you don't have a good optic, then that, you know, rifle that you have, no matter how expensive it is, it just isn't going to shoot repeatably. But as for the you know, any kind of gear that goes along with it, I would say a good rear bag. You can, depending on the type of rear bag, you can run it as a front rest, you know, if you're shooting off barricades or rocks or anything like that. And just you can use it for anything. So for that front rest, you can use it as a rear rest. You can use it as a pillow, I guess, depending on how big of a bag you get. Right now, I've been playing with the Solo Sack from Short Action Precision. It's a heavier bag, so it's kind of interesting to watch how the bags have developed over the years. So we kind of all started out heavy rear bags, and then we gradually moved over to light bags with the little micro beads. And now we're starting to drift back to the heavier bags again, running them off barricades and that sort of thing. So it's a heavier bag. It's got kind of I think it's a synthetic sand, some kind of fill. So I can run it off a barricade for the front of the rifle, and it'll keep it really steady. And it's also not so big and clunky that it gets in the way when I'm running it as a rear bag. So it kind of pulls double duty, and it helps cut down on the stuff that I bring around. And I've never really been one to bring around a whole lot of bags.
I was going to say, do you have a quiver of bags that you
No. Bags are just like anything, they're a tool, but I see a lot of people come out and, newer shooters like we were talking about, and they have all the bags under the sun because that's what they see shooters using on the internet, or that's what their buddy told them to get. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but the point that I'm trying to get at is don't get something that you don't use or don't know how to use. Or if you do get it, put the time in, put in some dry fire at home, just playing around with different positions and seeing how those different bags can give you a better position.
Okay, so we got scope, then rear bags. Are people doing a lot of stuff with slings? I know when I first started shooting, it seemed like if you had a really good sling, you could lock yourself into positions better and doing more positional shooting. Are guys still doing a lot of sling work?
Not so much. There might be a couple stages, or not a couple stages, maybe one stage every few matches that you go to that has a traditional, slung supported shooting position that they put you in. The match directors have really kind of moved away from that, just I think mainly due to the practicality of it. Shooting off a rock or a window or something, a tripod is a lot more, it's quicker to get into, you're probably going to be more stable, that sort of thing. I don't know why they shifted, but that's just kind of how the sport has gone. So slings are still important, one for carrying the rifle to and from where you're going. A lot of these matches, they're not necessarily hike and shoot matches, although you can find some that are that way. But you still have to go from stage to stage and carry your rifle and gear, in the truck, out of the truck, walk up the hill to another stage. So having the rifle slung to your body is going to free up your hands, make it a lot easier. I have been running the Tab Gear PRS sling, their Pinnacle rifle sling, and I like it a lot. It pulls, it obviously carries the rifle well. It has all the adjustment it needs. I like that it has 2 points of exit. So if you have the rifle slung on the front or you have it slung on the back, you can get out of the rifle, anytime that you need. They also have a little loop that you can clip in. If you have a carabiner, you can clip it into your belt. If you're running off a tripod, I even like running it off a barricade sometimes, just to pull my hips back and kind of lock in that position. Hopefully reduce that wobble a little bit so I can break a good shot. So if you get a sling, just determine what you're going to be using it for. I know the rifle's only sling. A lot of people like running it just slung across their body in kind of a patrol carry fashion, and they kind of pinch down with their elbows, and that helps lock them in as well. So with the slings that you get, I would just say make sure that it's adjustable, and then put the time into the gear, make sure that you know how to use it and use it to your advantage for your shooting style.
So precision rifle calibers.
Yes.
Now this has been an evolution in the last 5-6 years. It used to be the 308 was kind of king, and then 6.5 Creedmoor and 260 started coming in with the higher BC bullets, and now it's starting to move towards 6mm.
Yeah,
and a lot of guys are running that, and obviously it's all give and take and whatever. Like, what do you see? So you got some guys that they can't do anything in battle, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, we're not talking about battle. We're talking about a game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in game scenario, which is what we're doing, what do you see happening with these cartridges?
Like you were saying, it went from 308 to 6.5s and then to 6s. And kind of the first step of the 6s were like a 6 Creedmoor or the 6x47 Lapua. And now, and this is even just in the past year or two, they're starting to move to smaller 6mm cartridges. So like the 6 Dasher or the 6 BRX, which are kind of historically bench rest cartridges. They're able to push bullets to almost the same speeds. Maybe 100, 150 feet per second slower than the 6 Creedmoors and the 6x47s. But you're using less powder, you're using a different powder that's more readily available. I think a lot of people use Varget. I could run down to Cabela's right now and buy it if I wanted to. If I was using H4350, like in all these other mid-sized cartridges, not so much. So powder availability, I think, is helping push the cartridge selection that way, and also the inherent precision of the cartridges. They're developed by bench resters, and they're very, very precise. So again, it just gives you that little feel good to shoot little groups. but it also it's a trend from from 308 to 6mm and these smaller 6mm of recoil. So recoil is kind of king in shooting off of barricades and shooting positional. So if you're shooting a 308, a heavy 308, you may spot that impact, you may not, but there's a trade-off with everything. So if you're shooting a 6.5 or even a 308, you're pushing a bullet that has a lot more mass behind it. So you're going to have a better, or hopefully better, impact signature, I guess you could say. So either splash on target, or more importantly, the miss that you see if it hits off to the right side of the target and it's been raining and dust doesn't pop up. If you're pushing a bigger bullet, you'll have a better chance of seeing that dirt splash. The trade-off is more recoil. So if you're shooting from kind of a wonky position, then you might not even keep the target in your sights to spot it. So that's the trend, or that's kind of the reason behind the trend to the 6mm is there's just no recoil with them. Even if you're shooting from a weird position, the target generally doesn't leave your sights. You can watch it all the way in. You can hopefully see where it splashes and make some quick adjustments and go from there. So obviously the trade-off is you're pushing a smaller bullet, and if you're shooting longer distances, like if you're shooting 800-900 yards, 1,000 yards and beyond, sometimes the spotters can't see impacts on the steel. If you miss and the backdrop isn't very good, then you have probably not as good of a chance on spotting that miss and adjusting. But the trade-off is the recoil for all those closer in shots that you can see everything. So that's kind of the thought process.
So what's your caliber of choice?
Well, right now I'm still shooting 6.5 Creedmoor, just because that's what I have. I don't change things a whole lot. I think if you're getting into it, pick either a 6.5 Creedmoor or 6.5 by 47 or a 6mm. Both of those, they have very good bullets, and they're just getting better and better. Hornady and Nosler they're coming out with a lot of good bullets for both calibers, so the BCs just keep getting higher, which is good. And the recoil on a 6.5 still isn't bad. I guess it depends on how much you plan on shooting and kind of what you can afford. Obviously, if you're shooting a 6mm, depending on the cartridge, you're probably going to get less barrel life than you do with a 6.5. And if you can afford to shoot barrels out, multiple times a year, that's fine. Go ahead and shoot a 6, get a little bit of that extra performance just with spotting the recoil. If you can't, maybe shoot a 6.5, or if you're not, trying to hit every single match, maybe shoot a 6.5. You'll get a little bit more barrel life. There's factory ammo if you're shooting the Creedmoor. If you don't have a gun that's just dedicated to match shooting, you can have one pull double duty. So you can shoot some factory ammo, you can reload, shoot at matches. But performance-wise, in terms of ballistics, they're both very, very close, and it's going to come down to you as the shooter to pick up those hits.
Nice. Yeah, I'm having a 6.5 built now, and it's mostly just because availability of factory. Mm-hmm. If I want to show off the gun and do a range demo or something, and I'm out in the sticks, I can generally find 6.5 Creedmoor at the local shop. But that's why I went that route. So being around a lot of matches and running matches, what equipment do you see fail on people? Obviously you're at a comp, and that's the worst time for anything to fail. But what are those parts so that people can maybe prepare for that?
Scopes, I see, and this is from any manufacturer. It's man-made, right? It's mechanical, so everything's going to fail eventually. But if you get kind of a lower end scope, and it's not company specific or anything, but if you spend $200 on a scope, don't expect it to hold up for very long on a real rifle. What's that?
What tends to go out? Is it like the gears and the...
Yeah, some of them they don't adjust anymore, or they don't hold zero, so your rifle may be pointing in the same spot, but your optic is aiming somewhere else. So just getting a decent scope held in some decent rings, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. It's a pretty good time to be a long-range shooter. We have a lot more options than we did even 5 years ago. So there are lots of good affordable options out there for scopes. The other thing, triggers. Triggers work great, when you're shooting on the range, just having fun with your buddies. But when you take it to a match and it's windy and it's out in the desert, or there's a lot of that fine dirt that just gets into everything, that's when the triggers start going down. And again, a lot of companies, they're all reputable, but you can only stuff a trigger with so much dirt before something goes wrong. One trigger that has impressed me so far is the Trigger Tech triggers. I don't have any experience with it right now. I have one ordered right now, so I'm waiting for it. But I've seen, just from watching matches and people that are actively using them in a lot of these competitions, I won't say that they'll never go down, but I can't say that I have seen one go down yet. And those are in some pretty dusty matches. So, whatever technology that they're using seems to be working pretty good. And but if you don't, other triggers work fine too. But if you're shooting in a match that's really dusty, just try to keep the rifle covered with some rags, or some companies make some scope and action covers that you can wrap around the rifle that also kind of double as a little carrying handle that you can move the rifle around with. So just try and keep everything clean the best you can. Bring some lighter fluid or something like that to try and flush out the trigger if it does start hanging up on you a little bit, or even just bringing a backup trigger isn't a bad idea, because just like anything, it's man-made, it's probably going to fail eventually, and if you're shooting competitively, you're putting a lot of rounds down, and versus a recreational shooter compared to a competitive shooter, there's just a lot more rounds going down range. The equipment's just getting used a lot more. So
do you see a lot of scopes going down? Triggers. Anything else? Like, what's the third?
Maybe extractors, I guess you could say, or magazine feeding issues. With the magazines, it's more of sometimes a cartridge thing. Some cartridges, may not feed if they have steeper shoulders. Some magazines don't like dirt in them as much as other ones.
And that comes back down to practice with your gear and find out
So get out. If it's a super windy day, still go out and shoot. A lot of people try and avoid windy days because they don't hit as many targets. But that's probably going to be the best learning experience for you, is seeing, is failing and learning how to overcome those failures, and so you're prepared for the next time. But just keep everything clean, and magazines, feeding issues. A lot of that boils down to the relation between the action and the chassis, or the bottom metal of whatever you're running. But extractors sometimes go down as well.
So if somebody's on a tighter budget, and you said the scope is the most important other than the rifle, there's so many features on a scope. You can locking turrets, first focal plane, second focal plane, all this different stuff. What parts are must-have features, and what are just like nice to have?
Must-have, number one, a first focal plane scope. That, for anybody that doesn't know what that is as you change the magnification on your scope, the subtensions, or the reticle is basically a ruler. So we pay a lot of money for it just to have a ruler on our scope. But the holds stay the same regardless of what magnification that you're on. If it's not a first focal plane, then your holds are going to be changing every time that you touch that magnification. And holdovers, especially in the gas gun series, they're pretty much required if you want to get through the stage quick. Even with bolt guns, it's you may be on a stage that is a pretty short time limit, or if you're hunting, or really any scenario that you need to make a quick shot, a holdover is going to be the quickest option for you. So
with first focal plane, what's the downside of that first focal plane? Is there any?
F-class shooters and a lot of bench rest shooters don't like them, and frankly, they don't really need them for what they're doing. With that reticle staying the same dimension, it looks like it gets fatter as you increase the magnification. You're just looking at it closer, so it's not necessarily getting fatter. You're just looking at it. So that's But there's enough different types of reticles out there. There's floating dots. There's open centers. That you can still get a very precise hold on a very small target. So
you're using a normal crosshair, or are you using like a Horus?
Right now I'm shooting the Vortex Razor Gen 2, so their EBR2C reticle. It's kind of I like it. It's a good hybrid. So it has a little bit of an open center. So if I'm zeroing, at 100 yards, I can put a 1/4 inch dot in there and it fits pretty well. So that works great for low development and zeroing and, honing in on those really small targets. But at the bottom, it has a Christmas tree, Vortex's design. Every mil out that it goes for the wind, it has a little bit bolder dot and then has 0.2 mil dots in between those bold ones, so which they're a little bit more faint. So what I've noticed in using that scope and that reticle is that I don't notice the Christmas tree if I don't need it. So if I'm dialing everything and holding center crosshair, then it doesn't really obstruct any of my field of view for spotting shots or anything like that. But when I do need it, it shows up fine. I can see everything and have very precise holds, especially when it's really windy and we're shooting long distances, so that I'm not holding out in the middle of nowhere in the reticle. So I think having some sort of Christmas tree is definitely valuable, but it's not for everybody. So it boils down to personal preference. So with the first focal plane reticle, try out a Christmas tree reticle. If it's not for you, then maybe try it out a little bit more. But everybody shoots differently, so it's not a deal breaker necessarily.
So we got first focal plane is a must-have. What's like a nice feature that may not necessarily be a must-have, but if you have it, it's worth the extra
turrets,
money.
Actually, so when I first got the Vortex, I didn't think that I would care that much for the locking turrets. I thought it was kind of unnecessary, but now that I have them and that I have a lot of time behind it, it's just a really nice peace of mind. Kind of like a little insurance policy. You just lock that turret down and you know that it's not going to go anywhere. And when you break that shot, you're not going to have to worry about, did my scope turn when I took it out of the bag, or if I was carrying it across the range, did it slip on my jacket and adjust that way. So locking turrets actually turned out to be pretty nice. But again, not for everybody, but I ended up liking them a lot. With the turrets, I will say this is a little bit more than a nice to have. I would say it's almost a required in that, and this is for shooters that are using mil radian adjustments. Just make sure that you have 10 mils per revolution on the turret, because it's really easy to get lost when you're only using 5 mils per revolution, especially when you're shooting multiple targets. One target may be at 200 yards, the next target may be at 1,200 yards. So that's a lot of revolutions to be keeping track of when you're trying to shoot a target under a time limit. Everybody's watching from a weird position. So just try and make it as easy on yourself as possible.
Cool. So if you're prepping for a competition, and you're getting ready to go, and you don't necessarily have access to the range, or you don't want to make it out there, or you just don't want to chew up barrel life, what are you doing to train easily to tune you in?
So that's a really good question. I am a huge proponent of dry fire. At the house, in the backyard, wherever you can do it. You don't necessarily need a lot of space for it. There are little lenses that you can get that bring your parallax or the focus of the scope down to about 4 yards, which can be readily found in almost any house. So using those lenses to focus down on small targets, so it's not fuzzy. I can practice my holds, doing different holdovers on targets that I printed out on a sheet that are scaled, obviously for the range that I'm using it at. Shooting off ladders, couches, anything that you have around the house is going to benefit you, because it's going to put you in a different position, and the more positions that you're exposed to, the more prepared you are for whatever it may be, a match or a hunting scenario, or whatever it is. So coming up to a match, and just due to my schedule recently, I don't get out to the range a whole lot. So that's a kind of a really good question, because that's the exact scenario that I'm in right now. So I'll try and get in at least 15-20 minutes of dry fire practice a day, starting preferably at least 2 weeks out from the match. If I'm very well behaved, then will have already been dry firing periodically throughout the weeks before a match. way before a match. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. But a couple weeks, definitely try and hit it every single day. Working a lot of timed drills, so I'll do something that a friend and I came up with called the 12-second drill. So you stand behind whatever barricade, and you're aiming at about a 2 MOA target, and you have 12 seconds to build your position and break a good shot on that 2 MOA target. So the 12-second drill, what it reinforces is being efficient in building your position and not sacrificing any accuracy. So a 2 MOA target for positional isn't huge, but it also isn't very small. I mean, it's a nice balance, I think. So if you're starting off, maybe start with a 3 MOA target just to kind of get your feet under you and get comfortable with it. Because if you're starting off cold, even for me, sometimes I don't make it in 12 seconds. So it's kind of a warm-up drill. Build your position, break a good shot. So a lot of drills like that. I also like just run up and down the stairs or do some squat jumps or burpees and then go into my stage. So I'm shooting with an elevated heart rate because if you've shot any kind of competition or hunting or anything like that, there's a little bit of anticipation, especially at the beginning of the day. And if you come into a stage, your heart rate's probably going to be elevated. Especially if you're a new shooter, you're probably going to have an elevated heart rate for the majority of your match stages. And then once you settle in, it'll get a little bit smoother. But just practicing shooting with a heart rate that's elevated changes a lot of things. It changes maybe the way you get into some positions. And I noticed that, if you're huffing and puffing and trying to build a position really quickly, you start rushing shots. So it's a good mental exercise as well to really force yourself to slow down, break a good shot, spot that follow-up. Obviously, there isn't a follow-up shot or, spotting a correction with dry fire, but that's where live fire comes in. So live fire confirms what you've practiced in dry fire.
Cool. So if you're going to build a rifle and you have no money considerations, knowing everything over the years of competition, what are you building? Like what barrel, what action, what are you going to go for?
The barrel, I'm really not married to any one barrel maker. They all make really high quality tubes of steel. So whatever's available for the barrel. I'm actually building a Curtis Custom right now. So that's the action, it's a bolt action, and it intrigued me because it's a 60-degree throw. And I've been shooting Tikas for a while, and once you go to anything that's less than a 90-degree throw, it's kind of hard to go back. That's not to say that regular Remington 700 footprint actions aren't good just because they have a 90-degree throw. It's just it really boils down to shooter preference. So for me, I like the shorter throw. I like the fact that you can drop it into any kind of Remington 700 stock, so that leaves your options open to change it and customize it. I really like the KRG chassis, the Whiskey 3. I've been shooting that for a couple years now, and it just feels really comfortable. So it kind of blends the feel of a traditional stock in your hand with the practicality and modularity of a chassis. So you can bolt stuff on, take it off. I like that a lot. So, and scope, I like the Vortex Razor Gen 2s. So I know there are more expensive scopes out there, but it does everything that I need it to, and I've been really happy with it. It's a tank.
Cool. So with that, that's I don't have a budget. I'm just going to build whatever I want. Mm-hmm. So what advice do you have to somebody just getting in that is on a budget and they're shopping around for like a PRS rifle?
So first thing I would tell them is don't rush into it. There's a lot of good options out there, especially these days. I think Howa is coming out with some decent rifles. I know Howas have always shot well. The Ruger, obviously, that's really kind of opened the floodgates to quality, lower end rifles that still shoot really well. They hold up, and there's a lot of features for what you're getting. So the Ruger is a good option. Tikas, I'm a big fan of Tika. It's a really slick action. I think it's put together pretty well. It's going to be a little bit more, but it's still kind of in that budget-minded range of, kind of the shooters that they're looking at. So all the rifles that you're going to get are going to shoot under a minute of angle, and they're probably going to be around half minute, even with those budget rifles. So it's a pretty good day, or a pretty good time to be a long range shooter, like I was saying earlier. So
save on the rifle maybe a little bit and spend more money on the scope.
Yeah. So and with whatever you're choosing, just don't rush into it. Definitely put the time into doing some research, going out to matches or ranges and seeing if other shooters have the rifle or scope or whatever piece of gear that you're looking at. If you ask them, I haven't run across a shooter that wasn't enthusiastic about letting someone get on their rifle and experience it and maybe take a couple shots. So don't be intimidated to ask other shooters what they think. If you can get on their gun, see the gear that they use, they'll all be more than willing to help you out. So if once you make your decision, just have the patience, save up for it, and then go from there.
Cool. All right, so you have a book that you put out.
Yes.
That's kind of what spurred me with the interview. It's like, oh wait, I know Marcus, and he has a book. Cool.
I do.
Tell me about that.
So it's called the Practical Shooter's Guide, and I mean it's not very long because I know some shooters don't like to read.
So what are you talking about in there?
It basically breaks down a lot of the positions that you'll run into in matches and hunting scenarios, anything like that. Shooting from tripods, you can see on the cover, I'm shooting off a tripod. And the stuff that's in there isn't necessarily the only way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to shoot from barricades, shoot from tripods, that sort of thing. But it's just a starter place for people to start thinking about how they want to shoot from positions. So it goes over some of the basics of what you're looking for, regardless of what position you're in. I kind of have 3 positional principles. The first one is support the front of the rifle. That's kind of your first priority. For example, going back to the sling, I mean, we can use a sling and your hand will be supporting the front of the rifle. It's a starting place, but if I put that rifle on a rock or kick the bipods down, I'm more than likely going to be a lot more stable. So that's kind of the first priority, is support the front of the rifle. Second priority is support the rear of the rifle. So, if we can get that good prone position where we have bipod legs down and rear bag supporting the buttstock, then that's going to be probably the most stable you can get. And this is just kind of the basics overview. And then the third is get as low as is comfortable. Not as low as is possible, because if you're folded in half like a pretzel and you're not very flexible, that's not good. You're not going to break a good shot. So getting as low as is comfortable is important as well. The lower you get, typically the smaller the gaps are that you have to fill, either with a bag or with your arm. But it's a starting point. So, I mean, if you're shooting from a tripod, there's a lot of new advancements that are coming out with that, with really right stuff, and their Arca Swiss, clip-in plates and everything. That definitely changes things if you're shooting from a tripod. If you're not shooting from one of those clip-in plates and you're shooting from a hog saddle or a pig saddle or any one of those claws, the book goes over some techniques with the sling, clipping into your belt or wrapping it around the tripod leg that you can help tighten down that position. And it goes into, like what we were talking about earlier, of if you're wanting to improve your shooting, here are some ideas for a training regimen. Here are some, like that 12-second drill, for example, is included in it. As well as some other drills that I like, and everything in there is just a starting point. So, when I decided to write it, I kind of looked around and saw what kind of books are out there. There's a lot of books on reading wind, a lot of traditional slung shooting, but there really wasn't anything on shooting from a fence or shooting from a rock. So that was kind of my intent behind it, is just give shooters a starting point, get them thinking about shooting off of their bellies, off of tripods, off of rocks, fences, windows, and just expanding their shooting horizons, I guess you could say.
Cool.
So,
that's really all I had, man. So thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me down.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully you guys enjoyed what we had to say, and if it's good, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll give more good info.
It's all on Amazon.com. So
sweet, brother.
awesome.
Thanks.